I'm so excited that you have in your hands the Developing the Leader Within You kit. That was a purchase that I can promise you has great potential for your personal growth. You see, my commitment is always to add value to people. I want to come alongside of people and take them where they are and hopefully help them to go to an entirely new level. In other words, I want you to grow. And the Developing the Leader Within You kit is a growing resource for you. I promise you, it won't do any growing for you on its own, but if you'll apply what's in that kit to your life, by watching the videos, going through the workbooks, I promise you that you're going to begin to develop growth for yourself in an everyday process. Let me explain. You probably went maybe into a Christian bookstore and went to the Maxwell resource section there. You looked at this resource, Developing the Leader Within You, and you thought, well, okay, is this for me, or is this for my small group? I mean, how do I really use it? First of all, it is for you. I would always suggest to you that the first person that ought to start growing is you before you try to grow anybody else in your life. So absolutely, you can apply it to yourself. But the Developing the Leader Within You kit is designed not only for you, but if you're in a small group, share it with them. Watch the videos together. Discuss it. Do the workbooks together. I can promise you this. You will grow together as a group, and you're going to develop a growth environment to where you're going to begin to see the growth in one another, and that's a lot of fun. Perhaps you're a pastor. I would suggest strongly that you use it for discipling perhaps your elders or your deacons, your church board, some maybe key leaders within your congregation. Here's what I know. You never have enough leaders. And so if you're a pastor or if you are leading a small group, one of the things you're wanting to do is always develop and grow leaders. In fact, I have always said that you can have as many small groups in your church as you have leaders. So one of the greatest ways to give a gift to your congregation, if you're a layperson or if you're a pastor, is by putting this resource in the arms and in front of the eyes of the people in your congregation that are really going to be leaders. Let me suggest this. Look around your congregation and find some people that you would consider to be potential leaders. Put this resource into their life and begin to help them grow. Let me just give you one illustration of how Developing the Leader Within You will just help to take your congregation or your small group or you personally to a whole new level. Just the other day, I was talking to a person that belonged to a small group of a congregation in which they had taken the Developing the Leader Within You kit, and they had taken it and applied it to their lives. They kept talking to me about what they were learning and how they were sharing what they were learning. And as I watched their eyes and as I listened to the excitement in their voices, there was a real joy that came up within me because here's what I knew. I know that I came along somebody and helped them to go to a whole new level. And whenever I write books or whenever I do videos or audio cassette tapes, I always have one purpose. That is to add value to you. So quit listening to me and grab hold of that material and start now and begin to develop the leader that is within you. Today I would like to talk to you on the subject, what is a leader? Now I do leadership conferences all over the country. And usually in leadership conferences, we allow a time for question and answers where people can raise their hand and say, hey, John, I want to ask you a question about what you said in the area of leadership. Interestingly enough, the number one question that I'm asked when I do a leadership conference is people will raise their hand and they'll say, John, how can I find a leader? How can I find somebody to help me in my business? How can I find somebody in my organization that has leadership potential? They're always looking for leaders. And so my desire in this lesson today is to give you a picture of what a leader looks like. So by the end of the lesson, you kind of have an understanding of when you're looking for a leader or when you're trying to be a leader yourself. This is a picture, first of all, for you to apply to yourself as a person that wants to be a leader, but it's also a picture that you apply to others when you're looking around trying to find leaders. So let's get going because we've got a lot of stuff to cover, and I just really want to grab hold of the material and apply it to your life. You see, when I see a leader, I think of the word, first of all, leadership. Because leaders lead. That's exactly what they do.
So when somebody says, John, what does a leader look like? I ask them to look around and see who's leading others. It's kind of like watch the people and see who the people are influenced by or drawn to. That's how you begin to pick out a leader. Now, let me share with you 5 myths about leadership. Number 1, I hear this often. People say leaders are born, not made. Now, you've heard that, haven't you? In fact, let me just take a time out while you're writing your notes. I bet everyone in this room, how many of you raise your hand and say, John, I've heard the saying, that leaders are born. How many of you heard that before? Okay, it's just a very common myth. In fact, when people ask me, many times they'll say, John, in a conference, again, in a question and answer period, they'll say, John, are leaders born? And whenever they ask me the question, are leaders born, I always give them the same answer. Of course they are. Now, when they're asking, are leaders born, what they're really asking is, are there some people that when they're born, they've got it? And there are other people that when they're born, they don't got it, I guess, huh? And I guess if you got it, you lead, and if you don't got it, you just kind of look for a line somewhere, and you get in line, and you just kind of march up 2, 3, 4 throughout life. Now, here's the good news. There are people that obviously are born with a leadership leaning, just like there are people that are born with a musical leaning and kind of a giftedness in that area. So there are people that are born that have a leaning towards the ability to lead, maybe more than others. But what I want you to understand today is that you can learn how to lead. Now, this is huge. You can learn how to lead. Because we're talking about how to develop yourself as a leader. If you couldn't learn how to lead, why would you be here? Why would I be here? If really you couldn't learn leadership, we'd all go home. When I just say, okay, gang, it's been great to meet you. It's been wonderful. Now go home. There's no need for you to be here or me to be here unless it is a fact that you and I can learn to lead. So a huge myth that I think causes many people never to study leadership is the fact that they think that because they, quote, weren't born a leader, they're never going to learn how to lead. The second myth about leadership is this one, that leadership is a rare skill. Sometimes we look at leaders and we try almost to mysticize it until we say, well, it's just a rare skill and very few people have. You know what I believe about leadership? I believe that it is rare, but not because it's necessarily a rare skill. I believe it is rarely taught. I believe that most people do not lead because they've never been taught how to lead. And I can give you a classic example in my own life. I have 3 college and graduate degrees. So I've spent a lot of time in college. It didn't do a lot of good, but I've spent a lot of time there. In all of my years of college and graduate school, I've never had a leadership course ever. I've never gone to a classroom that was called leadership. I've never before had anybody sit down and try to tell me how to lead. And in my work, which has been always in the people business, which was basically always leading people, you would think that in the educational process, we would be taught how to lead. Now, here's all I want you to understand. The reason there are such few leaders is not because there needs to be such a few leaders. It's because leadership is not often taught. That's why I have made, in the Enjoy Life group, has made a commitment to train and develop leaders, because here's what we find. The moment we begin to teach you the things we're teaching today, people begin to learn leadership, they begin to feel comfortable with leadership, they begin to have a picture of leadership, and they begin to grow as a leader. Myth number 3. Leadership exists only at the top of an organization. I hear that often. They'll say things like, well, the reason I don't go to a leadership conference is because I'm not the president of something, or I'm not the principal of the school, and I'm not at the top. And many people think that leadership is at the top. If you're not at the top, then, quote, leadership doesn't pertain to you. Now, here's what I want you to understand. Leadership is not position. Leadership is influence. How we influence people determines how we lead. And every one of us have a certain degree of influence. So here's what I want you to know. You can lead an organization from the middle of the pack if you have influence. In fact, I've often said you don't even have to be at the top of the organization if you just know how to influence the influencer. All of a sudden, you can begin to lead them. So leadership is not something that's just for the few people at the kind of the top of the heap organizationally, and all the rest of the people are just going to follow. No, leadership should be learned by everyone, and you can lead from the middle of the pack. It's not just positional, it's influence. Myth number 4. The fourth myth is that all leaders are charismatic in personality. We kind of have this idea that leaders just have this charisma about them, and that people just kind of want to follow them, kind of like the Pied Piper. Now, we all know charismatic leaders, and you know, it's wonderful to have them. In fact, with a charismatic type of a leader, you enjoy following him or her. But here, let me explain to you that although charisma is important, charisma doesn't make you a leader. There are people that have charisma that are not good leaders. There are people who lack charisma that are good leaders. In fact, I wrote a book several years ago called Be a People Person. And in that book, I talk in chapter 2 about how to draw people to yourself. Basically, I talk about charisma. I talk about how to obtain charisma. See, charisma is not something that you're born with. Sometimes we think charisma is like a personality. It's not that. Charisma is a mindset. People that are charismatic think differently than people that lack charisma. Let me explain. For example, if I'm coming into this room right here, let me explain the difference between a person that has charisma and a person that does not have charisma. If I have charisma and I walk into this room, and what's your name?
Denny.
Denny. If I walk into this room and I'm a person that has charisma, and I walk into it, and here's what happens. If I have charisma, I go into the room and I put Denny's agenda ahead of my own. So I talk about the things that Denny's interested in. I ask him questions. I find out his interests. In other words, people that have charisma are other-focused. Does that make sense? In other words, they talk about the things that interest you. People who lack charisma are self-focused. And that's the main difference. You see, if I lack charisma, what happens? I walk into a room like this, and the first thing I think is, boy, I just hope somebody talks to me. Man, I hope the people are friendly, and they don't look real friendly to me. If somebody would just come up and make me feel a little bit at home. See, people that lack charisma, they are always focused on self. People that have charisma are focused on others. Does that make sense? Yes, sir. So when we talk about leaders and charisma and that whole deal, here's what I want you to understand about charisma. Let me share with you what it will do for you. Let me share with you what it won't do for you. Look at your notes. Charisma will get you inside the door. In other words, if you're charismatic, people will say, come on in, because they like you. Isn't that true? So charisma will get you inside the door, but credibility will keep you there. The character and the credibility that you have is more important in your leadership than the charisma. The charisma is kind of like the upfront stuff, the icing on the cake. But character is the inner stuff. And so when people say, well, all leaders are charismatic in personality, it's not true. It's not true at all. In fact, if you could only choose one of the two, choose character in your life. That's more important than charisma. Now, let me just stop here for a moment. Let me just also say, it would also help many of you who already have good character to try to work on charisma. I mean, don't you know just some wonderful people that are very boring, huh? I've often said when we get to heaven, God's not going to say, well done, thou good and boring servant. You've bored a few on earth, come up here and bore more, huh? So you want to also work on charisma, but that doesn't make you a leader. Let me give you myth number 5. Leaders control by manipulation. I've seen that happen many times. I've seen leaders who do manipulate, but that isn't what leadership is all about. In fact, it's always wrong. It's always wrong to manipulate people, and one of the saddest things I know is when leaders are in leadership positions and they use people. It's very sad. Let me give you the difference between manipulation and motivation, because sometimes we get them confused. Manipulation is moving people for the leader's advantage. In other words, if I'm a leader, I manipulate you when I move you where it really advantages just me. That's manipulation. Motivation is moving people for everyone's advantage. And that's always healthy. Because what do leaders do? Leaders move people. Leaders lead. Nothing wrong with moving people. Nothing wrong with motivating them. It's always wrong to manipulate them. So let me just share with you, since leaders lead, 3 things that I want for you to understand about the making of a leader. Number 1, understand the value of leadership. Understand that there's great value in learning to lead. Everything rises and falls on leadership. In my book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, I talk about the law of the lid. And basically, the law of the lid says that your leadership will determine your success. And if this hand is my leadership and this hand is my business, what that means is, if this is how well John Maxwell leads, all it means very simply is that my business, my organization, can never rise up any higher than the level of my leadership. So when people say, well, my company's not growing, my department's not growing, my business isn't growing, the organization that I lead hasn't been growing, what's the problem? It's never a problem with the organization, the business, department, or company. It's always a leadership issue. How do you grow an organization? Either grow the leader. I used to say either train them or trade them. Because leadership is the lid on an organization, and it always keeps the organization from growing. Now, here's the good news. If this is my leadership ability, then my organization's always going to come under it and never go beyond it. But the good news is I can grow as a leader, and here's the value of learning leadership. So as I grow as a leader and I go up a notch or another notch and I keep on growing, what happens to my organization? Now, my organization has room to grow, doesn't it? So I can just continue to go right up to where the level of my leadership is. So understand the value of leadership. Secondly, make a commitment to learn how to lead. Make a commitment to learn how to lead, and it really does take a commitment. Look at the quote in your notes on Earl Nightingale. If you spend 1 hour a day for 5 years on any given subject, you will become an expert in the field. Let me just share with you some of the costs, because what happens is growth stops in your life and my life when the price gets too high. That's the way it always works. So let me share with you some of the costs. For example, number 1, it'll cost you what I call personal change. If you're going to become a leader, there are things that you're going to have to change in your own personal life. There are going to have to be some things that you add that you don't do now. There are going to have to be some things that you take away that you do now. Isn't that true? And none of us like change. And so, therefore, many people never grow as a leader because they don't want to make the changes necessary. Another cost is time. It's going to take time. As I shared with you a moment ago, there's a process involved here. Number 3 is dollars. It's going to cost you money to change. And the only reason it's going to cost you money to change is because you've got to become a student of change. You've got to read some books. You've got to listen to some tapes. You've got to go to some leadership events. You've got to get exposed to where leaders are. Number 4, now this is a huge cost for a lot of people. Sometimes it costs you friendships. Sometimes it's a friendship relationship issue. Have you ever taken a journey and you started climbing in your journey, and you found out that the person that was maybe a very close friend didn't want to take the journey with you? In other words, they kind of wanted to settle for something a little bit less than what you wanted to settle for, and felt the pull as you're still trying to grow, as you're still trying to develop, and they're stopping right here. And feel the pull of going upward and growing and developing yourself, but the pull of stopping and going backward, because your friend didn't want to grow. Sometimes that's what causes leaders to have a tinge or a sense of loneliness. Because sometimes in their growing and development, there are relationships and friendships that are never going to quite be the same, because they're going to continue the journey where the person that they would love for them to take the journey with them is going to stop in the journey. Does that make sense? Now, we've heard the expression. I don't even think it's a leadership expression, but we've heard the expression before. It's lonely at the top And I think that expression comes probably out of what I'm teaching right now, a sense of pulling away from maybe a lot of people that you really want to kind of go with you on this trip and that journey. And I heard one time a guy say, it's lonely at the top, so you better know why you're up there. Yeah, sometimes friendships and relationships, there's a cost factor there. And number 5, this will seem a little strange to you, but if you really become a leader, it will cost you your options and your freedom. Now you're thinking, oh, no, John, that's the reason I want to be a leader. I want to have options. I want to have more freedom. I want to be able to do what I want to do. Can I tell you something? When you become a leader, you don't get to do what you want to do anymore. You get to do what is best for the people. And all of a sudden, you no longer live what I call the selfish agenda. You no longer get to do what you want to do, but you're constantly saying, what is best for the people? And many times you have to put yourself way back on your agenda list so that you can help lead the people according to what their needs are. There's one more thing about this leadership thing, and then I'm ready to take you to another look at a leader. And that is that, number 3, you need to start leading. You just need to start leading. People all the time, they say, well, John, how can I learn how to be a better leader? And it's very simple. You never learn to lead just by learning. You learn to lead by doing. In other words, you've got to practice. You've got to practice leading. You've got to get a group of people and practice leading. And sometimes that gets a little tough. And there are 4 levels that will help you understand this maybe a little bit better. Number 1 is leadership that interests people. And that's the person who says, I know where I'm going. There's something interesting about a person who knows where they're going. I mean, you just kind of look at them and say, they've got a goal. They maybe have a purpose in life. So that's the interest level. Secondly, there's leadership that impresses people. And that's the leader who looks at you and he says, you know what, I not only know where I'm going, but I've been there. And we say, oh, you've been there. Tell us about, you've been to the top of the mountain. Tell us about it a little bit. Okay, there's a little bit more of an impression there. The third level of leadership is leadership that influences people. And this person that influences others, they not only have been there, but they've taken you with them. And so you're coming back and saying, man, I'm telling you, we have taken an incredible journey together. But the level that I want to teach and help you to learn to lead is on level number 4, and that's the level that impacts people. Because really what I'm wanting to see is not only you to learn how to take people to the mountain. My goal is for you not only to be able to go out and find people and influence people and take them to the top with you, but you know that you have become an excellent leader when you've taught people to go find people and lead them. In other words, we want to encourage you, we want to teach you how to multiply yourself. Because if I'm the only one doing the leading in the organization, in this auditorium, if I'm the only one leading, it's going to take me a lot of time to come down and get one of you, and then take you back to the top, and then come back down and get one of you, and take you back to the top. It's not going to work that way. It's kind of like the guy in the circus that you've seen him before with the plates on the end of the stick. Have you ever seen this where he gets the plates and he starts spinning? What he does, he moves that stick and he gets those plates spinning. And he gets that plate spinning real fast. He puts it in the hole and he gets to the next one and he gets that plate spinning. He puts it in the hole and he does that one and he goes all the way down and he gets clear down the other end. Now he's got 10 plates spinning. It's wonderful. But by the time he gets down here, the plate on the far end is just about to fall off, and he goes back over there and he gets that one going and that one going and that one going. He just moves back and forth. And after a while, you say, that could wear you out. And a lot of leaders, their tongue is dragging. Why? Very simple. Because they've never taught anyone else to spin the plates. And the only thing that gets done is what they touch and what they lead. But when I think of a leader, what do leaders do? They lead. The letter E in the word leader, though, gives me another picture of a leader. Because when I think of a leader, I think of the word equipper. Leaders equip and train people. And one of my favorite equipping quotes is the one by Harvey Firestone, who said, "It is only as we develop others that we permanently succeed." So let me give you the game plan if you want to be a leader that equips people. Number one, develop self. The first person that you learn to work with is not someone else, but you learn to work with yourself. Does that make sense? So you begin to grow and develop yourself. Number two, lead self. You not only develop yourself, but you got to learn to lead yourself. And let me just flat out stop here for a moment and think of it this way. If you wouldn't follow yourself, why should anyone else? And yet I know all kind of people who have never developed themselves, never led themselves, but you know what they want to do? They want to lead everybody else. So you develop yourself, you lead yourself, then thirdly, you develop others. Now you have the right, because you have disciplined and developed yourself, to develop others. And number four, you lead others. But that's not the end of how an equipper thinks. Number five, you lead others to develop others. And number six, you lead others to lead others. That's when leadership begins to be effective. That's when leadership begins to multiply. When you begin to lead others to lead others. Now, when I start talking about the fact that leaders lead and leaders equip people, what I want you to understand about this is that equipping people is not easy. If it was easy, more people would do it, okay? So first of all, understand, this is difficult. But I love the story about, in fact, it was a friend of mine who I went to college with, and his name was Stuart. And he studied for the ministry, and he was a pastor for a while, and then he quit the ministry, and he became a funeral director. And I said, Stuart, why did you kind of leave the ministry and become a funeral director? He said, well, John, he said, ministry's hard work. Well, I said, I know it's hard work. He said, for example, when I was a pastor, Joe had an alcohol problem, and I worked with him and counseled him in the whole process. And he said, Joe still has an alcohol problem. And then there was Harry and Sue. They had a marriage problem, and I counseled with them for a year and a half. They still got divorced. He said, John, the thing I like about my new job is when I straighten them out now, they stay straight. Now, there's this mindset that as a leader, we'll just get in there and we'll put these people in place, and we just go, okay, you're a leader, all right, and then you're a leader, you stay there, right there, and you're a leader, and we go and we think that, okay, now stay in place. But people don't work that way, do they? They move away. They change thoughts and ideas. They change jobs, they change organizations. And when you get to equipping people, it's never a static position. In fact, I was known as an equipping leader, and many times as I travel around the country, people say, well, do you have everybody in your organization equipped? No. You never get everybody equipped. It is a never-ending process. But that's the game plan. Now, let me give you just 5 quick thoughts that will help you when you are wanting to equip people. Let's take the word equip for a moment. The letter E stands for evaluate. Evaluate the people that you have around you. And you ask yourself the question that's on the right-hand side of your notes. How well can they do? And from a 1 to a 10. In other words, if I look at you and I'm getting ready to train you, I got to ask, okay, what's your potential? And this is kind of a guess in the beginning, perhaps, but I'll put a number on you. I think they're potentially a 7, whatever, okay. The letter Q in the word equip. You have to qualify them. You have to then put them in the job. And you got to look at them and you got to ask yourself very simply, how well did they do? Now, this is a lot easier. This is a lot easier to identify than the first one, and that is how well can they do. That's a little bit intangible. But after they do the job, you look back and say, okay, how well did they do? The letter U stands for unite with them. You not only evaluate them and qualify them, but then you unite with them and you say, okay, how well are we doing together? In other words, are we creating synergy? Are we multiplying ourselves? And then the letter I in the word equip, you've got to invest time with them. In other words, the time that I'm spending with the person that I'm equipping and training, is it profitable? Is this a good profitable time? And then the letter P, you've got to provide resources and experiences for them. Resources and experiences. Absolutely essential. Let's go to the letter A, because when I think of a leader, I think of the word attitude. That is so huge, because your attitude will determine your altitude. And if you look on the next page, I have a marvelous, marvelous thought by Charles Swindoll, a good friend of mine. And then at the bottom of the page, and I'm not going to read them right now, you can do this on your own. I talk to you about what is an attitude from my book, The Winning Attitude. And at the top of page 25, I talk about how our attitudes determine our capacity to lead others. And there are 20 questions of which I want you on your own to ask yourself. But if you'll allow me, I'm taking you now to the bottom of the page. Because the attitude that you have, or the attitude that I have, determines how we see four things. Are you ready? My attitude determines how I see myself. Because it is true. I cannot go any higher than my self-image. Always remember this. You can never rise higher than how you see yourself. What happens is, if you have success above your self-image that is low will cause you to sabotage your success. You will literally pull down the thing that you are successful in to match your self-image. People do not become successful way beyond how they see themselves. So my attitude to myself is very important. My attitude determines how I see others. And notice this phrase: I cannot go any higher than my belief in people. Isn't that true? In fact, I love the quote that says, it's wonderful when the people believe in the leader, but it's even more wonderful when the leader believes in the people. My attitude, thirdly, determines how I see my business, because I cannot go any higher than my dream for my career. And number four, my attitude determines how I see my failures, because I could not go any higher than my willingness to get back up. Isn't that true? In fact, let me just talk to you a little bit about failure and what it does to us, because failure has a huge influence on our life. In fact, I wrote a book on failure recently called Failing Forward. And basically the book teaches you how to fail successfully, okay? Okay. And let me just take a poll here today in this conference. How many of you have failed at least one time today? Huh? Sure. Okay. With me, failure is a spiritual gift. Okay. Okay. See, the question is not, are you going to fail? The question is, how you're going to handle failure. That's why in your notes, I have the thesis of the book, Failing Forward. Here it is. The major difference, do you see it, between achieving people and average people? Is their perception of and response to failure. And that's an absolute fact in your life. How you see failure going in, how you respond to failure going out, is going to determine how you handle failure. Now let's just talk about it just for a moment. Now we all fail. I fail, you fail. See, what I have come to the conclusion is we need to have somebody write a book, which I did, or have a course on what I call Failure 101. I mean, when kids go to college, you know what? When kids go to college, the first course they ought to have is they ought to sit there and the prof ought to say, welcome to Failure 101 course. And we're going to teach you how to fail, because all of your life, you're going to fall down. The question is not, are you going to fail? The question is not, are you going to fall down? Isn't that true? The question is what you're going to do about it when you get, in fact, in the book, Failing Forward, one of the things I teach you 15 things of how to fail correctly, but one of the things I teach you is that when you fall down, when you're on the floor, while you're down there, you might as well pick something up. You don't get down there all the time. Clean the floor while you're down there, huh? See, what happens is when we fail, what do? As soon as we're down on the floor, what do? We try to get up as fast as we can. We get up real quick, we get up off the floor and we, button our belt and everything. Well, hope nobody noticed me. And the whole, everybody in the room says, boy, did you see Maxwell fall flat on his face right there? You see, our embarrassment of the failure cause us to get up too quickly, and we never learn what we're supposed to learn. And you know what life does, don't you? Life just comes along and knocks us back down. In fact, life will knock you down until you learn. And so many of us have never learned how to handle failure. Now, here's what I'm saying to you. When I look at leaders, they have an attitude tenacity that allows them to keep getting up, because leaders get knocked down a lot. In fact, I had one friend who said, I'm never down. I said, what do you mean you're never down? He said, I'm either up or getting up. And that's what I'm talking about. This ability to have this attitude tenacity that will allow you to just keep getting up. And that's why I love so much the paradoxical commandments of leadership. Because this deals with our attitude better than anything else. This just kind of helps us understand that if we're going to lead, we're going to have this attitude tenacity. Look at it with me, would you? Look at these commandments of leadership. People are illogical, unreasonable, and self-centered. Love them anyway. If you do good, people will accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Do good anyway. If you're successful, you will win false friends and true enemies. Succeed anyway. The good you do today will be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Honesty and frankness make you vulnerable. Be honest and frank anyway. The biggest men with the biggest ideas can be shot down by the smallest men with the smallest minds. Think big anyway. People favor underdogs but follow only top dogs. Fight for the few underdogs anyway. What you spend years building may be destroyed overnight. Build anyway. People really need help, but many attack you if you do help them anyway. Give the world the best you have and you'll get kicked in the teeth. Give the world the best you have anyway. Does that make sense? And only a good attitude lets the leader get back up on top. When I see a leader, I think of the word dreamer. Leaders are dreamers. They have a dream, they have a vision. And there are 4 vision levels of people. Some people never see it. I call them the wanderer. They just go through life. They never see it. I mean, they just wonder. You know what I mean? They just wonder. Nobody's home. Nobody's ever been home. Nobody's going home. There's just no home sweet home. They just wander all throughout life, okay? And then number 2, there are some people who see it, but never pursue it on their own. They're the follower. That's the person. They see it, but they'll never have the initiative to do it on their own, but they will get in line and follow. Then, number 3, there are some people who see it and pursue it. They're the achiever. They're the person that will truly climb up the mountain and get to the top. But the 4th level is the level that I want to encourage you to go to, and that is some people, they see it, they pursue it, and then they help others to see it. And they're the leader. They make life better, not only for themselves, they make life better for other people. And my friend Andy Stanley, who wrote an incredible book that I would encourage you to purchase called Visioneering. It is the finest book on vision and vision casting I have ever read in my life. And I read a lot of leadership books. But Andy Stanley, in his book Visionary, says that vision weaves four things into the fabric of our daily lives. Number one, passion. There is no such thing as an emotionless vision. You never had anybody say, you know, I have this boring dream. Well, maybe it'll come to me someday. When anybody has a dream, they have accompanied with it passion, don't they, huh? I call passion the great energizer. There's something about it, passion, that just creates major energy in a person's life. The second thing a vision weaves in for us is motivation. Because a vision is a picture of the future that motivates us to pursue it. And thirdly, direction. Because a vision helps us to prioritize our life. You know, once you have a dream, all of a sudden you're willing to give up things for that dream, aren't you? All of a sudden you say, well, if I'm going to get the dream, I'm going to give this up, I'm going to quit doing this, and I'm going to start doing that. And number four, purpose. A vision makes you an important link between current reality and the future. And you begin to have a sense of significance and purpose in that entire process. I want to read the next paragraph because I think it's very important. It says, a person without experience sees a vision idealistically. To that individual, the vision alone is enough. Naively, this person casts the vision to others, expecting the dream to do the work, and failing to realize that a vision needs support. A person with experience learns that people buy into the leader before they buy into the vision. Experienced leaders realize that people are fickle and dreams are fragile. Experience has taught me these principles about vision. And I'm going to share with you now, out of my book, Developing the Leader Within You, the 5 most important thoughts I have ever grasped about the dream and the vision. Here it is. The credibility of a vision is determined by the leader. What makes a vision credible? It's not the vision itself. It's the leader who casts the vision. If you believe in the leader, you'll believe in the vision. If you don't buy into that leader, you're never going to buy into where that leader is trying to take you. The credibility of the vision is always determined not by the vision, but by the leader. Secondly, the acceptance of a vision is determined by the timing of its presentation. Timing is everything when you're trying to pass on a dream. In fact, here's what I have found. The right dream or the right vision at the wrong time produces failure. The right dream has to come at the right time for it to be successful. Timing is essential in leadership. The value of a vision is determined by the energy and direction that it gives. When people say, well, how valuable was the vision? How did the people buy into it? How do you know? It's very simple. You look and you ask yourself one question. Do the people in the organization have energy? Do they have direction? You see, once a vision has been cast, if it has been cast correctly, once a dream has been received, if it has been received correctly, it will energize the organization. That's why you never see an apathetic company or an apathetic business or an apathetic department that has a great dream and vision. They don't match. Dreams give energy. Next, the evaluation of a vision is determined by the commitment level of the people. How do you evaluate if the dream really was successful? How much commitment did the people give to it? Because a realistic, right dream will draw people into a level of commitment, a higher level. And finally, the success of a vision is determined by its ownership, by both the leader and the people. And that's huge. So here's how you break a dream down. Here's how you sit down and break a dream down so everybody can understand it and everybody can grab a hold of it and get a hold of it. Number one, break the dream down so everyone can understand it. Have you ever listened to a speaker sometime and he was trying to share something with you, and basically when he or she finished, you didn't have a clue what they said? And you just kind of, you walked out, and the best thing you could say, well, he's deep. Well, she's real deep. She's down. Well, it was just a deep lesson. That was deep. Yeah, deep doo-doo's what that is. Put the cookies on the lower shelf. Get it right down to where people can grab a hold of it. They need to understand it. Number two, they need to own it. It's not enough to understand it. They have to buy into it. And thirdly, they have to contribute to it. By the way, that's how you know they own it. Because people will contribute to what they own, but they won't contribute to what they don't own. Let me explain it this way. How many of you have ever rented a car? You went to maybe another town. How many of you rented a car? Well, yeah, everybody's rented a car. Okay, can I tell you something what I know about that car you rented? You have never waxed a rented car. Man, you don't get that. You don't go to the car rental and you spend a couple days in it and you say, you know what, honey, I'm just going to spend the afternoon waxing this car. It just needs wax. No. You don't wax a rented car. You don't own it. You don't put in extra effort to something that you don't own. So people in the dream, they got to understand it, they got to own it, they got to contribute to it, and number four, they have to pass it on. They have to be able to pass it on. They have to have the ability to pass it on to someone else. Because that's how the dream and that's how the vision multiplies. Okay, let's review for a moment. When I see a leader, I think of the word leadership, equipper, attitude, dreamer, and the letter E is excellence. When I see a leader, I think of excellence. And excellence, in the bottom of that page, derives from the word excel, which means to go beyond average. That's what excellence means, to go beyond average. Last year, I spoke at a university commencement. And as I looked at, I don't know, there were probably 7,000 or 8,000 people there that day. But as I looked at the graduating class, I decided that I wanted to talk to them about excellence. And basically in that lesson, what I taught them was, I want you as graduates to do more than is expected of you, to go the second mile. And I was really working on them in the back, the fact that life doesn't owe you something, you owe life something. Right? My father taught me that. My dad taught me, he said, John, quit waiting to kind of clip coupons from life. Quit waiting for your lottery number to come up. And in fact, my dad used to say, John, he said, you know, when you were born in this family, you were already a debt. In fact, when you were born, he said, you owed your mother for 9 months of room and board. You got the picture? Okay. And so son, take out the garbage. Get busy here. Get busy. Okay, now. So as I was looking at the college graduates, I was sharing with them, go the second mile. Become a person of excellence. Go beyond average. Go beyond what's expected. And I gave them an Old Testament example. Remember when Abraham decided to find a bride for his son Isaac? And so he sent his servant back to the homeland to find a bride. And so the servant, he's kind of nervous because this is the most important assignment he's ever been on as a servant. He's going to have to really do well, choose well. And by the way, when my children were both unmarried, I thought we ought to go back to that Old Testament custom of the parent picking out the mate but my 2 kids totally nixed that one. Anyway, so he's nervous about this, and so he's saying, God, you're going to have to help me. How will I know who should be the bride, the whole deal? And you know the story. A young lady named Rebecca came down to the well, just like the rest of the women. And it was in the cool of the evening when everybody was going to the well. And she saw the servant of Abraham, and she said, well, let me give you something to drink. Well, that was nice. That was hospitable. But that was kind of Eastern culture, so that wasn't unusual. But then she said, I would also like you to give your camels some water to drink. Now, that was huge, folks, because the servant had 10 camels. And 10 camels, after traveling a day, will consume each camel 20 gallons of water. So when she said, I would like to give your camels something to drink, now this is not just being nice. There's 200 gallons of water to draw from this well. Let's say she had a 5-gallon bucket or jug. When she took that 5-gallon jug or bucket to the well, she'd have to go down there and she'd have to put it down. I don't know how long it took, but let's just say it took 3 minutes because everybody was around the well. It was a busy time of the day. Let's say it took 3 minutes. She'd drop the bucket down and she'd pull it out, and then she'd go to some water trough somewhere and she would put the water in, and then she would come back. Okay, if it took her 3 minutes, and she had to make 40 trips, that would take her 2 hours just to draw water for the camels. This is huge. So you talk about excellence. When she said, I'd like to give your camels something to drink, she was saying basically, I'm going to hang around 2 hours and do this for you. Now, the story's a great story, because little did she know that this was the process. This was the process of how the servant was going to select a bride for Isaac. And Abraham was a wealthy man. And little did she know that this 2-hour exercise was going to pay off huge. She was going to be the bride of Isaac, and she was going to be married into one of the wealthiest families of that generation. I mean, she didn't know all those things. And what I think is so important is she didn't do it for what she was going to receive. She did it because it was the right thing to do. I always think it's a little sad, don't you? When people kind of look at you and say, well, I'll be glad to do something for you, but what's in it for me? You see, leaders don't do that. Leaders understand that they are to lead their people with excellence, that they are to go beyond whatever is expected from anyone else. And I put in your notes because I don't want to miss this. Here's what I want you to see. Today's philosophy basically is minimum effort for maximum expectation. Where Rebecca's principle was maximum effort for minimum expectation. In other words, Rebecca looked at life as a leader does. I want to give it my best shot. I want to be a person of excellence. You see, Rebecca teaches us 3 things. One is that we're not to live our lives as a legalist. Because in her culture, it was kind of like an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And she said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do more than is expected of me. And number 2, she teaches us that we cannot walk the 2nd mile until we first of all walk the first. In other words, the first thing she did was she gave the water to the servant, and then she said, no, let me take the care of the camels. And you know what I find a lot of times? I find people want to take shortcuts. And shortcuts don't pay off in the long run. In fact, my friend Nancy Dornan says the longest distance between 2 points is a shortcut. And I find other people, they have kind of basically what I call destination disease. They just think, boy, if I could just know him or marry her or live there, if I could just work for them, everything would turn around. The 3rd thing Rebecca teaches me is that extra blessings are a result of extra effort. And my good friend Zig Ziglar says there is no traffic jam on the extra mile. Oprah has a great quote, I have it in your notes. Doing my best at this present moment puts me in the best place for the next moment. Great quote. When I see a leader, I think of the word leadership, equipper, attitude, dreamer, excellence, and one more word I think of when I see a leader, and that's the word relationships. Great leaders relate well with their people. In my book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, I have a law called the law of connection. The law of connection says that leaders touch a hand before they ask for a heart. I was in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I was pulling up to a service station many, many years ago, and I saw this on a window of that station, why customers quit. And I just want to pass it on to you. 1% die. And I want to stop here long enough to say that is a legitimate reason. We never want to say that's illegitimate, okay? 1% die, 3% move away, 5% because of other friendships, they don't continue to go with the company. 9% of the customers quit because of competition. 14% because of product dissatisfaction. But here's what I want you to catch right here. 68% quit because of an attitude of indifference toward the customer. Wow. Now, I'm not going to talk a lot about relationships here because I'm going to teach relationships in another lesson. But what I want you to do is see for a moment the profile of a leader, and I'm not going to go through that, but I want you on your own to look at the 25 different snapshots of a profile of a leader. And I want you on your own time to look and evaluate yourself. But I want to close this lesson on what is a leader by sharing with you two things quickly, and then we're done. Here it is, very simply. When I lived in San Diego, California, I was a San Diego Padre baseball fan. Now, you have to understand, that's not a lot of fun. In fact, I used to say that the Padres have the finest minor league team in the majors. Okay. And one of the things I noticed during the Padre game, between innings, about between the third and fourth inning, out on the big vision board, they would begin to put together on like a puzzle on that board a baseball player's face. And everybody would kind of watch it because in the beginning you didn't know which baseball player's face they were going to put up there, and they would only put one piece of the puzzle up there. Obviously, nobody could tell who the player was with just one piece of his face up there. So it just kind of glued you to the screen because you wanted to see how long it took you to put together the puzzle. And so there'd be one piece and then another piece and another piece. And about the fourth or fifth piece of the baseball player's face, it would start to come together for you. And what was most interesting is that when it got to maybe that fifth or sixth place where you could really tell who the baseball player was, there would be an audible sign. You could just hear the people out at the stadium that night. You would just hear them, they go, ah. They knew who it was. All of a sudden, they said, oh, that's who it is. I know that. Now, here's what I've tried to do in this lesson. I've tried to piece together for you what a leader looks like. And the reason I've tried to do that for you is because many of you want to be a leader yourself. And you can't be a leader yourself until you have a picture of what it looks like. So if I'm to say to you, be a leader, you say, but what does it mean to be a leader? Okay, we've shared with you what it means to be a leader. But here, this is as important as for you to develop yourself. You'll never be able to pick out a leader unless you know what they look like. Here's the way this works. When I fly into a city and I'm speaking somewhere in a conference and people are picking me up, if the person doesn't know who I am, I found that there are two ways that they connect with me when I come into the airport. And one of the ways is sometimes they'll hold up a sign. And they'll have, John Maxwell on it, and I get off and I see all these people and all these, and if there's my name, and I walk over and introduce myself to the person. That's one way. Another way is sometimes they'll take like my book that has a picture on it, and let's hope it's a recent book. But they'll take my book and they'll have it. In fact, I've seen them many times. They'll be in the kind of waiting in the airport area where the passengers get out, and they'll have my picture out there. And what they're doing? They're looking at my picture, and they're looking at the people coming off. And see, what's interesting is one person who sticks up the sign, they make it my responsibility to find them. The person with the picture, they make it their responsibility to find me. And there's two types of people in the world. If you just kind of in your company or in your business, if you just hold up a sign, and, just hold on, looking for a leader. The good news is there'll be some leaders that'll find you, but there'll be many leaders that'll never see you. They'll just kind of pass you on. But if you have a picture of what a leader looks like, you'll know what they look like. And most of us, we miss opportunity because we don't know what opportunity looks like. Isn't that true? So what happens is opportunity passes us. And how many times as an opportunity passes you, say, oh, I wish I would have done that. And how many of you have done that at least once today? Sure you have. Sure. Oh man, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I grab a hold of that? You know why you always recognize opportunity on the other side? Because you never recognize it until it passes you. But the person that's successful, they know what opportunity looks like when it's coming down the road. And so they are able to seize it and take advantage of it. That's the same way it is about leadership. The reason we're trying to help you to develop as a leader is to give you a picture of what a leader looks like so you can be a better leader, but so that you can recognize leaders around you. So when they're coming, you say, oh, here comes a potential leader. Here comes another leader. So that you can begin to bring them around you and so that you can be more successful. Now, I want you to look at your neighbor right now in closing and say, now I know what a leader looks like. Go ahead and tell them that. And I want you to look right back at him and look at him one more time and say, and you have potential. Thank you very much.